I've always wanted to do this, to stand on the Olivier point on my own, and I will give you my Hedda Gabler in a moment. But you will be expecting the wonderful 3 times Olivier award-winning Howard Davis, the director of wonderful services rendered last year, and of course this incredible show which some of you might have seen and some of you will be seeing tonight, but all of you will be seeing soon. Howard is unwell. And he's unwell in a way that means that he's lost his voice. So he has had to be forcibly restrained from coming and squeaking to you this evening. But I am delighted to say that some of the actors were daft enough to leave on their mobile phones when they left the theatre. And consequently, answered their mobile phones, and therefore they have been summoned back because we didn't want to let everybody down. So this will be a unique and one-off experience, which hopefully will never be repeated the rest of this season. You all know the drill. The pre-show talks here are hosted by me, Kate Mosse. I'm the biographer of Chichester Festival Theatre and a playwright and a novelist, one of you, a Chichesterian, and I will be doing all the post-shows as well this year. And it is a very special season for all of us because we have been so blessed to have Jonathan Church and Alan Finch running and changing this theatre and making it a world-beating theatre. And this is, of course, therefore, a really odd thing that the very first show, very first pre-show in the Festival Theatre of this season is going to be this one-off event. But I hope you will all be thrilled to meet the actors a little ahead of time and be very grateful to them for giving up what is essentially their tea time to come and do this. We will, therefore, not be doing questions, if you don't mind, and I will be letting them out at 6:25 because there's a great deal of hair work and wigs that has to go on for some of the ladies, not the gentlemen, you understand. So I'm just going to read out the actors who have stepped into the breach, and if you can give them a huge round of applause, then they will be very grateful, and so will I. So I'm delighted to say that Michael Fox, Abigail Cruttenden, William Gaminara, Jonathan Cullen are all coming on, all from the company, and also Miranda Cromwell, who is the assistant director, is stepping in. Ladies and gentlemen. Almost as if we'd rehearsed it. Yeah. Perfectly. Before we start, can I ask who has seen the show already? Wonderful. And who is going in tonight? Oh. Anybody not got a ticket? No. See me later. Yes, absolutely. We will make sure that we give nothing away. Now, the other question I wanted to ask is, knowing the Chichester audiences, many of you will have known that The Enemy of the People and Enemy of the People was on here in 1975. Donald Sinden was in the role of Stockman, and Tony Robertson played the role that, in fact, Jonathan Cullen is playing, I think. And I wonder if anybody saw that production here. Yes, there we are. I said they would have done. Well, it's a different one. It's Christopher Hampton, different translation. I'm going to start with you, Michael, because you're unfortunately sitting next to me. Hello. I mean, not for me, obviously. I'm fortunate to sit next to you. None taken. Great start. Yeah. You play one of the newspaper chaps, and we're not going to talk about everybody's characterisation individually, but you actually have a relationship with the play anyway. You've been in it before. Do you want to say a little bit about the last time you were in An Enemy of the People?
I played young Morton, who's one of Dr. Stockman's boys, when I was 9 at the National, when Ian McKellen, Sir Ian McKellen, was playing Dr. Stockman. So I'm gradually working my way through. So then I'll play Jonathan's part, and then I'll go on and play Will's part, and then I'll be so bored of it that I couldn't possibly play Dr. Stockman. But no, it's I don't remember much about it, but it's just always been a massive part of my childhood. So it feels really funny coming back to it. I feel a closeness with it. So.
When you were a boy star, as obviously you were, did you feel at that moment, playing at the National, that you wanted to be an actor? I mean, is that where it started for you, or was that just a bit of fun?
It was fun, really. Everyone was saying, "Oh, wow, you're doing it with Ian McKellen." I was like, I don't know who he is.
He hadn't been Gandalf then, you see?
No, he hadn't been Gandalf, so I knew he was a big deal, but I was just like, he was just the sort of older actor. And so I didn't think I was going to do it. I actually tried to move away from acting, try and get some security. and then it dragged me back in. So I'm doing it again, but I'm loving it.
Yeah, very different sort of thing. Abigail, you play the wife of the lead character, and I think the play is often seen as a play about whistleblowing, about the contrast between idealism and pragmatism, a small town. Play was written in 1892. It seems terribly modern. But she, as the wife of the man who decides to blow the whistle, she is a very fundamental part of the play. Now, was she a character that you'd always wanted to play? Did you know the play itself? What was your history with this?
I didn't know the play. I'd never seen it. And so I came to it completely fresh. It's quite a... it's difficult to say without giving anything away particularly, but she's very much part of I think we have certainly tried to make them very much a team as a couple. Rather close, good relationship, but as in all good relationships, it has its, I speak out and yeah, so I think I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, it's very difficult because, of course, we don't want to spoil any of the characterisations. Well, William, I'm going to go. You are such an interesting character in the play, in that you're the brother of the lead character, you're the mayor, you're the official face of the town, and you care about your town, as does your brother. When you came to the play, did you come with a sense of whether you were a goodie or a baddie? Where the moral ambiguity in this play, it's very strong. Are you a goodie or a baddie?
Well, I think it's slightly the wrong question, if you don't mind my saying.
Right,
because, no, I mean, in as much as, from an actor's point of view, you don't really ask that question, am I a goodie or a baddie? Because you have to... You can't be judgmental on your character like that. You have to believe in who you are and believe that what you do is right. And it could be that you do awful things but to people on the outside, but you have to believe there's a reason why you're doing them, and they're good reasons. And history might judge you as a bad person, and audiences might. But from the inside, I certainly don't believe he's a bad person. He's doing what he thinks is best for the town, and best for his brother, because as well as loving his town, he, at some level, loves his brother too. And
did you work with Hugh, who plays your brother, plays Stockman, to develop that sense of who they were as brothers, how far back those shadows went? Because every now and again something burst out and you think, God, that sounds like the sort of thing that someone would say, yeah, but when I was 7, you did that. And there's a real sense of that relationship.
No, it's very strong in the play that there is this kind of grown-up relationship, and you're very aware of a hinterland of these two as children, and that this rivalry has been with them forever. So these childhood rivalries and this competition and the differences is now being played out in adulthood. And although sometimes the mayor will dress up the way he speaks because he holds a formal position and lapses into a very formalistic language, when things get tense, they both snap back into bickering like young boys again. Yeah. And what's very nice is Stockman also has a couple of children who are both boys, and they are a perfect kind of mirror images of the grown-up brothers. They don't have much to do in the play, but when you see them, every now and then when one walks past, the other one will try and trip him up or whatever, and you get that sense of the same thing being played out a generation on.
Yes, and Abigail, sometimes your tone of voice is that between the two brothers, your husband and your brother-in-law, which is, pull yourselves together, boys. This is not a playground. It's very touching, actually. From the audience, I think a lot of us want to go, really, guys, seriously, sort yourselves out. It feels like eavesdropping on a real conversation. I mean, such is the power, I think, of the performances. Jonathan, you have a wonderful comic role in this. You're the voice of, the small independent trader, really. Did you approach that with the sense that a lot of the comedy in the first act in particular, before the real pain of what do you do starts to come in. Did you approach it with the sense you were going to have fun with the role?
You know, it's a funny thing. It's slightly taken me by surprise how much the audiences are tickled by Aslaks and the character I play. And delightfully, it's taken me by surprise. I've enjoyed that, and I've had to learn to allow the audience time to appreciate him. He makes me laugh secretly, but I wasn't quite so sure that people would be so amused by him out there. I mean, there are some things that Ibsen, you know, his brilliance as a writer, by now he's been writing a few plays by this time, and he's got very, very good at certain things. And like Wagner, he has this leitmotif thing that so each person has characteristic little turns of phrase that identify them and in a sense, qualify who they are. And I have a couple of these that recur, which made it easy learning the lines, actually, is that they recur at every time I appear. These little verbal tics, so to speak, which are markers of aspiration for me and self-definition. People who have a great urge to define themselves constantly. I am this sort of person. I hold these qualities and I occupy these positions in society. They're people who are generally relatively insecure about occupying the position they hold. And I think out of insecurity comes comedy, usually. There's a great definition of comedy by the great French theorist of comedy, where I'm going with this, Henri Bergson, who says that comedy is, in French, is the mechanical stuck onto the human. It's when human beings start behaving slightly like robots that they get funny, or that they start behaving in an automatic ways. So when their little turns of phrase start happening to cover the fact that they're panicking, basically. Rather like me now. Then it generates comedy. There's also disparity of social status generates comedy, I suppose. And, you know, Aslaks the printer is in a situation where he has massive aspiration. And it's a very small town. So there's very little room for manoeuvre. And like most, I live in a small town. I live in Lewes, the capital of East Sussex, which is the sort of...
It's all right, you're allowed to boo at that moment.
Sister town of Chichester, capital of West Sussex. And I'm sure Chichester is entirely different, but Lewes is a rather small, backbitey kind of place at times, where everyone knows everyone else, and what's more, they know everyone else's business. And the room for manoeuvre for an upwardly mobile aspirant character like myself is very small. And so, in a sense, the fights are so vicious because the stakes are so low, if you know what I mean. If that makes sense. So, when the town turns a particular way and decides that it thinks en masse about a person, then that pack mentality becomes quite a savage one. But I won't give away any more about the play.
Before I bring in Miranda, the assistant director, who has an enormous and very, very, very important role in this production, but we can't tell you what it is because you haven't seen it yet. But when you've seen it, you will really know that she deserves every minute penny she's being paid by Chichester Festival Theatre. But before I bring Miranda in, Ibsen is enjoying quite a moment at the moment, obviously, with lots of different productions. There's been quite a few productions of An Enemy at the People, the Alcola, Barbican. It is a play that has serious moral questions at the heart of it. At what price idealism? If you discover something is wrong and going on, do you expose it? Do you think about the consequences? These are all extraordinary things that we live thinking about now. This play was written in 1892, in London for the first time 1893. When you first get into the rehearsal room, Howard has cast you all, and there you all are reading and meeting. Do you think about those bigger issues, or do you just simply start with the text and your own character? Can you just share a little bit about what the process of being in a rehearsal room is like? Which comes first, cart or the horse? Or not, obviously. What would you like to share?
When I first read Billing, I saw it as a young idealist, and I wanted to get into the mindset of wanting to, take down the system. And perfectly, Owen Jones has written a book recently called The Establishment. So because Ibsen didn't, I needed to fill out the rest of Billing that isn't necessarily there in the play. So I felt like I could only do him justice, really, if I filled him out with basically Owen Jones, who for me is an equivalent, a guy, a journalist, a writer who wants to pick apart things going with the system above him. I don't know whether Billing, well, you can be the judge of that, whether he has the tact or the intellect to do the same thing that Owen Jones does. But I felt like it was really important to give a grounding in, if it was me personally, how can I get into that psychology for now? And I think that it's really exciting because the play completely resonates now for a young guy at a newspaper who's annoyed and frustrated with the system. So that's what I did to fill in the gaps.
I mean, our very first day, Christopher Hampton spoke to us a bit about Ibsen.
Oh, did he?
And we read the play, but we also talked about the world. But from then on, from the second day, we were up on our feet and we were working with the script and with the text.
So that the themes come out naturally,
yes,
in
and
terms of the audience rather than in you.
And sometimes we stop and discuss something and something will occur to somebody, but really we're working very much with the text, with what we have in front of us.
Yeah.
Yes, no, it makes me think of your first question actually, because when I started on it, I found it quite hard not to think of my character as a bit of a baddie, because I couldn't quite see how he could possibly take the views he did take. And it was only by contemporising it and thinking of that situation in a contemporary way, whether it's fracking or global warming or something that's very much with us now, and making that the central situation, then I could understand how people take different positions and vested interest. It's more than just vested interest. You actually believe in your point of view. It's not just about people manoeuvring and being dastardly to make themselves rich. It's about people actually believing in different points of view. And so it is useful to think of contemporary ideas just to help you then connect with the original thing that's in the play.
And the consequences. If one course of action is followed, there are this set of consequences, and if another one, there's a completely... And it could be the death of the town, so...
Yeah.
I mean, sitting in the audience, I found my sympathies changing, actually. Particularly when you think of the lead character as a man with 3 children, an incredibly loyal wife, all of those consequences, it becomes much less clear. I mean, I think what your performances do so extraordinarily is make the audience think, what would I do? And that is an incredible achievement, actually, when you're so lost in it that you start to, be one of those people yourself.
I think I'd agree, and I think in many ways this play is about at what point does one draw one's personal line. It's about the battle between compromise and idealism, if you like. Realism and idealism, some people would call it. People like Willie's character would call it. How do we live in the world? How are we to live well in the world? And it's not just... We talks a great deal about society. Society is indeed in the title, in a sense. But it's a question of... what you see are many different smaller societies and groupings within this society, and it's where you owe your loyalties. How extensively you spread your imaginative loyalty, I think this play is about. On that topic, in a sense, to return to your question, Kate, it might be worth sharing something Howard said in rehearsal, which struck me quite strongly. He was talking about American actors and English actors, and he said what in his experience working with American actors, the difference is that, or rather I should say, that the difference he made was that English actors are tremendously good, as he expressed it, at holding both responsibility for their individual role within a scene, the truth of that part, but at the same time holding responsibility for the scene and hence, by implication, the play as a whole. So that he said what he enjoys very much in working with English actors is that they have a sense, I suppose you could call it unselfishness, if you like, that they're willing to serve the play at times and step back slightly from choices they might take in characterization. That said, I'm not doing down American actors. I've worked a lot in America, and I enjoy working with American actors because there's a proper selfishness about them. At some sense, that's all you have to do. You're there to fight that character's corner, and it's a good thing to do. It's a bit, I, as an actor, tend to look rather too widely, I think, and I always have to encourage myself to go, just fight a Slackson's corner. And in fact, so much so, Ibsen doesn't even give him a first name, so I'll have to choose a first name for him, and that'll be my personal commitment.
And did you choose one?
I did. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
That is so mean. At the post-show, we'll get it out of you, because then we give you drinks, you see. I would just like to bring you in now, Miranda. We normally have directors on this stage, obviously, being asked questions. And this is possibly a bit hard for you to answer, but it would be terrific to know, and just to share with everybody here. As an assistant director, what are your primary responsibilities? Do you have a set of things that the director doesn't do? Are you there to back him or her up? Could you just tell us a little bit about what this role actually is? Because we see you celebrated in these programmes, but we never get to ask you questions.
Well, it's very particular to every process. So the first few days are always key, because usually it's the first time that you're meeting and getting to know who that director is, how they're going to work, and therefore what is your job. And so with Howard, I think I've been incredibly privileged to be in this situation, because Howard is an absolute master of his craft, and he's had 40 years of experience, and so therefore you get a very good sense straight away of how the room is going to run. And he's incredibly economic and incredibly technical. So I did a lot of catching up, I feel like, in the first few days, but he was very clear at the beginning that there would be additional duties for me and what they were, and that I had responsibility in casting the children and also rehearsing with the supernumeraries, which I can say because it's in the programme. But I won't talk too much about exactly what that is. But he was amazing because he kind of trusted me, having only met me very briefly once, to take a big responsibility for part of the play, and it's been a real honour working alongside him. It's a huge learning curve. Your day-to-day duties are mostly things about supporting the director, supporting the actors, supporting stage management, trying to problem solve. So you're trying to fix things that you think might become a problem, whether that's to do with scheduling or whether that's to do with props, or it could be something to do with an actor who's maybe having trouble with a certain section. It's really complicated, but brilliant, because you get an overview of the entire process, where I feel like a lot of the actors are in their part, stage management are in their part, design are in their part, and they're kind of completely obsessed, quite rightly, with their process. As an assistant director, you get to run around and be kind of all over the place. So I hope that answers the question, but it's been an amazing journey for me.
And when you start a job like this, what is the level of your research? Because often I ask actors that, and some just read the text they've got. Others do weeks and weeks of research and have to throw a lot of it away when they get in the rehearsal room. What did you do to be ready to know Ibsen, this particular play, and even Howard's work? Did you research into the sort of things that he had done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really key to have an understanding of the writer, obviously both writers in this case, because you've got Ibsen, but you've got Christopher Hampton, who's adapted it. Then you've got Howard. I also did quite a lot of research on protest, and looked at environmental kind of studies as well, because I felt like that had quite a lot of relevance. But with Howard, again, it's kind of interesting, because he didn't give me too much of a steer. Some directors are really specific and kind of give you a whole massive to-do list, whereas Howard's very kind of straight to the point and be here and I'll ask you if I need something. So I sort of went away and did a lot of my own stuff. So I looked quite a lot at protest because of the role that I had to take on within the production. Yeah, and obviously understanding the playwright and the context in which it's written, and what kind of reaching consequences it might have for today.
And one of the things that obviously we, people of Chichester, shall we say, not of Lewis, obviously, feel we're very proud of this stage, but it is a bit of a bugger. Rupert Everett once described, he said, playing the stage is like throwing a sausage into Oxford Street and seeing where it lands. And I didn't ask him to elaborate on that. I was worried about what he might say. But obviously you will have been working in a rehearsal room, and you had, what, 4 or 5 weeks of rehearsal together. What is the process for all of you bringing yourself out of the rehearsal room onto a stage like this, where you are surrounded and the acoustics are challenging? You know, can you all say a little bit about that, how the production changes when it starts to become real on the stage?
What's the process? Fear, mostly. Is it
Fear.
fear?
Yeah. Coming in here, it did feel like everything you'd been working on had just disappeared completely.
Because it's not a stage that we were saying in the first couple of days, where we were trying to find where the centre is and where the balance of it is, really, because we were so used to this not really being a... Although it was taped up on the wall in our rehearsal room, we were like, oh, the audience are going to be there, but you just kind of forget that. And then, oh, no, the audience are actually over there. So you have to just...
And you can see the whites of their eyes.
Yeah, but it's actually a really lovely... As soon as we had an audience in the first time, it was like, OK, it does make a lot more sense now, because you get there's something out there, whereas when our first couple of tech days into the abyss, it was quite a strange place to... I didn't feel that sort of safe. But then...
I found it quite difficult, I must say. Particularly difficult. I mean, it's always an odd moment when you move from the rehearsal room to the stage, but the shape of the stage is odd, and I kept losing my bearings on it. I just wasn't quite sure whether I was facing centre or... And it's only just beginning to settle now, and yes, also having people so far around the sides, which we didn't particularly address in the rehearsal space. We always knew about it. So there has been a process of learning to kind of try and open up that and just get your bearings on and remembering where the centre is.
I think intentionally as well, through conversations with Tim Hatley and with Howard, it's intentionally disorientating. I think that was really one of the... Sorry.
Now you tell them.
Yeah. So I think it's really a play about different angles, and I think that there is something very angular about the stage and very confusing about the angles, which is an intentional thing.
That's really interesting, because I really felt slightly seasick for the first couple of days on it. I felt slightly ill. It was sort of, because it was... Yeah, did you?
Yeah,
you played the stage
definitely
before.
I've played the stage before, but not in exactly this diamond pointy configuration. I've played this stage, and I've played the Olivier stage, which it somewhat resembles, in the sense that it's an epic space, Epidavros kind of space, and you have to take the space and hold a sense of the audience all right around you. What I remember from being here in 2004 and 2005 was this,
Master and Margarita and Nathan the Wise, I think you were.
Yes,
I know. You were all saying, what was he in? There we
are. It is Midsummer Night's Dream as well, in this space also. And, in fact, The Seagull. And it's a sense of, like, instead of, in a Pros Arts theatre, it's very easy. We're used to rehearsing in a Pros Arts space, and we mostly rehearse in rectangular rehearsal rooms, and the director and assistant director sit down at the end. So you have this 90-degree relationship to them. And here, suddenly, all the angles are very disconcerting. So where before I was just sort of throwing grain to the chickens, as it were, you suddenly have to get up and sort of broadcast it all around. So you have to sort of spread your performance right from one side to the other. Or sort of put a line over here and then go, they've got my back for 10 minutes now, but they've got Hugh's face, which is better, so that everything's fine. So
they're the sibling rivalry coming back.
But it's a bit hard to describe, but seasick is the best way to describe it, is that until you get a sense that this is your centre line around which you orient yourselves, it is a bit like being aboard Captain Horster's ship on the way to America. It's a very swirling sea. We're just about now getting our...
But it's starting to become really exciting, because actually there's nowhere to hide, really. So if you want to... There's exciting moments where people walk away from a character and this side of the audience really know what the character thinks about that character. And that becomes really exciting. You're never really in a dead space, are you?
It's halfway to being in the round, really, isn't it? Feels like
I mean, one of the things when Alan Finch and Jonathan Church refurbished the theatre in 2012, and they did keep coming back to, should they cut off that? Because, of course, they'd learnt the lesson when they built the Olivier stage. It's a slightly different design because this is so unusual. And Jonathan Church, when I interviewed him about it, said, in the end, they kept coming back to the point that Olivier had stood there. And that whatever else happened, all new actors just had to deal with the stage. You just couldn't chop it off in that sort of way. Is there a danger when you're doing something that is so wonderfully, on the one hand, claustrophobic, in that you're in a drawing room and it's all the tensions in families and we all know, behind the closed doors and all of those conversations. Is there a danger on a stage this big that you lose that intimacy of the claustrophobia of the family and the fact that people formally come in? Willie, often your character comes formally in and then he formally leaves. How did you manage to keep it? Because it's so intimate, but you're very spread out from each other often the time.
I think, again, that's one of the things that happens when you transition from the rehearsal room to here, because generally speaking, the rehearsal rooms, you can vocally, your range could be much greater. You can bring things down. Everyone who's in the room probably knows the lines already now because they've heard it several times, so you don't have that to take account of. And then there is a bit of a shock when you come out and you have the space in front of you, and also you've got to kind of make sure that people on the back wall can hear things. So you do have to adjust. And that's something actually which is what previews are about, because we've constantly had notes about, just bringing it up the whole time. But it is a trick doing that and not at the expense of claustrophobia and intimacy and all those things that are so crucial to it. So it's a kind of balancing act in that respect.
And you started, right at the beginning of your rehearsal process, and you all had a view of your character and of the play and of the narrative arc and where the rights and the wrongs fell. Now you're playing it to audiences. Does it feel the same? Have you changed your minds about some of the characters, about the things they do?
I certainly feel like now I've been in front of the audience, I recognise what I first really enjoyed about him, and then I'm like, oh, actually, maybe that's the thing that the audience really enjoy about him. And because we have a job to do when we come on stage, my character certainly is a character who he comes on. Ibsen's put him in to serve a very clear, strong. It's a job for me in that sense, in terms of the arc of the play, and he needs someone to come and do a certain job. So when you hear slight feedback from the audience, you kind of go, actually, maybe I'll take that little spark a little bit further and see where that takes me a bit more. So it's definitely like it gives you that bit more confidence that, okay, this thing's working, so I'll move in this direction a bit more, I'll find that more exciting and things like that.
I think it's been fascinating seeing it in front of an audience, because I think both me and Howard and the rest of the creative team outside of it have been really surprised at how attentive and aware the audience have been, and very early on, they've been picking up on those plot points that feel like they're incredibly subtle, intimate family conversation, or that are really key points within the play. And so I think that has kind of enabled you guys to really refine what you're doing as well, because it's helped make it really sharp and really angular, and understand at what point which characters are really driving through with their intentions. So I think the audience has been incredibly helpful in that way, and it's been amazing to sit in on the note sessions and really understand how technical it becomes from that point in the rehearsal room where it is effectively finished but not finished, because then the next element is the audience, and what are they receiving, and how do we help them to receive that more, I suppose.
And a final question before I release you to your very brief tea and you to your wigs, I gather, or your hair. When you're going to be doing a long run of something as big as this, and it is emotionally very powerful and it's distressing in some ways, I would say, how do you manage to keep that freshness so that every time any of us comes and we're seeing it for the first time, how do you keep that sense of your character being themselves on the stage and not just getting a little bit, bored with it, I suppose?
I think it's such a rich play, and all the characters, whatever you're doing, you're working it every night, and it will be very slightly different every night. And it's very exciting to play it every night. So there isn't a chance to get bored. I mean, possibly if you were doing it for a year, you might go into kind of... But
you'd start to want a different ending.
Yes, but we don't have long enough, actually, to. I don't think.
Because it's a challenge, though, isn't it? That you must keep your characters as you have all agreed and Howard has directed and Miranda's supported. So you can't just feel, well, today I'm going to make her a bit perkier than usual. Or can you? Can you make subtle changes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you... I mean, personally, I don't know... Personally speaking, I don't really decide, unless I've had a note on something, that I think I have to do that. I just try to experience it every night and experience whatever and the more that happens, then it will be very slightly different because you're reacting to what somebody's saying to you, and if they're saying it to you in a very slightly different way, then you're going to reply in a very slightly different way. It doesn't mean the core of your character is a different person, but...
It's just you're living and breathing.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you want it to be, anyway. That's how you hope to be every night, I think.
Yeah. I remember hearing Sheila Hancock interviewed on Radio 4 one time and saying that she'd had a taxi ride to the studio and said, I'm an actor, and the taxi driver apparently went, I could do that. I could do that job. And everybody scoffed slightly at this idea of his. And she said, no, he's right. Any of us, we all act our different personas every day. And then she had this great phrase. She said, the trouble with being an actor is you have to have an appointment with inspiration at 7:30 every night. And for week after week, And I think that is really the question you're asking. And I suppose I'd say when I was a young actor, I used to stand in the wings and I'd run the scene. The words would say, like this before everything, then I'd go on like this, play the scene and come off and go, damn it was so much better in the wings. Because
it's like that writing novels, better in your head.
I'm sure it is, but it's that thing what you don't allow for as a sort of ambitious young actor is actually that the theatre happens in the space between the people who happen to be on the stage tonight, and the real spirit is to walk on thinking, I wonder what's going to happen tonight, and that's what, as the time goes by, that's what I try and encourage myself to do. But equally, it's a sort of confidence trick, because you know what's going to happen, because hopefully you're going to say all the lines right. Hopefully nothing will go drastically wrong that way. But you want to allow some tiny wriggle room so that, you'll catch someone's eye and something will happen, or a little smile will happen here, or somebody will drop something and it'll be down to you to pick it up. There's always... Every single performance is subtly and slightly differently calibrated from the one before it, I'd say.
And equally, if something goes really well one night, and you think, actually, that scene really worked, and then you have to throw it away, because you have to go, because otherwise if you desperately try and recreate that the next night, it's just not going to happen. So you have to just kind of go, that was great that time. Might happen again, might not. And then...
There's a famous story about Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne, told to me by an older actor, when I was struggling in a comedy a long time ago. And he said, apparently, Alfred had some kind of line where he got, I think it was in a Coward play, actually, and he got a huge belter of a laugh at the point where he said, could I get a cup of coffee or something? And as they played, over a couple of months, the laugh disappeared. And he did everything he could. He started doing funny faces and taking a long pause before the line, taking no pause before the line, holding the coffee cup up, putting it down. And at the end, apparently, Lynn Fontanne said, Alfred, do you want my advice? He said, just ask me for the cup of coffee. At the moment, you're asking for the laugh. Which I thought was a great story, and is, in a sense, a good reminder, is what you're saying. You get stuck on, it went really well last night, so I'll do the same tonight. And then it's a different audience, and we've had a different day, so it doesn't play the same.
When you were saying the Sheila Hancock story, I was reminded of the actor Prasanna Puwanaraja, who had the same sort of conversation, got in, and the guy said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I'm an actor." And the cabbie went, "Oh dear." On that note, you've all been very generous to give up your time. We've been talking about live... Hang on. Oh, I know. No, off you go. We're going to have many applauses. And it really does illustrate just what we've been talking about live theatre, that something happens and yet you all step up. I would like you to just acknowledge them all by name again. Obviously, Miranda, Jonathan, William, Abigail, Michael. I'd also like to say a big thank you to everybody here at CFT who leapt into action as well, and the company manager who made it possible for this. I'm sure that everybody would like to wish Howard the best of speedy recoveries. It is press night on Wednesday, and everybody will be back to their sparkling self by then. On the 5th, Thursday, I will be back for a post-show discussion over the way for Travels with My Aunt with some of the company, with Patricia Hodge. And we will be doing the official post-show for An Enemy of the People on the 12th of May on this wonderful stage, where many of these actors will reprise their brilliance, and then they will be able to tell you things. Because it is very difficult for actors to talk about their roles without spoiling anything for you who have the most incredible treat in store. It is one of those shows, I saw it last week, where when the lights came up for the interval, I thought that about 10 minutes had passed. It is an extraordinary production that Howard and everybody has done. It is like eavesdropping on a real conversation in the room. And I think that Patrick Garland, who directed the 1975 version with Donald Sinden of An Enemy of the People, will be watching from somewhere up there and think that this is an incredible successor to that. So, ladies and gentlemen, the company, and thank you all very much too.
Thank you.